Okay, welcome back guys. Today we are going to look at storing our data inside a MySQL database. So yeah, let's get into it. First we have to create a new database table, and for this purpose I'm going to call it YouTube forum and create that. Now this is a database administration software called PHP MyAdmin, and if you wanted to, you could create your tables using this. That is fine. However, I am going to use the Laravel migration system because I think it's very easy to use and very easy to maintain. However, to use that, you first have to do one thing, and that is you have to go to your Explorer and then right click this PC and go to Properties, and then you want to click on Advanced System Settings. You'll get this window. Then you have to go down here to Environment Variables, and we have to set up our PHP variables so we can use the PHP command everywhere in our system in the command window. So I recommend you create a variable, so a new variable, and call it, I don't know, I call it PHP home, and then set it to the path where you installed examp and then /php. So the default in this case is going to be C examp php. And then if you don't have this variable already, you have to create it. It's a path variable, and if you don't have it, just create a new variable, call it path, and add this piece of text. So and a %, then your variable name, in my case PHP home. That can be literally whatever you want, and then another %. Now if you already have other variables set up in this path variable, or other like other paths to other programs that utilize the command system, then you have to make sure that you end off the previous one with a colon. So yeah, that's what you want to do. Then you want to click OK and OK. Now to check if this worked, I am going to go to the website folder, my root directory. I am going to shift right click and open a command window, and then I'm going to type php-v for version, and it should show up something like this. So yeah, that's what you want to do for this. Then what you want to do is go into a text editor, that can be any text editor of your choice, and navigate to the app folder, and then to config, and then the database.php. And now we're going to set up our database credentials, so what we need to connect to our database. By default, examp, the MySQL user for examp is root without a password. So I'm going to change the database to YouTube forum, which we just created. And my user is going to be root, and I don't have a password. For security reasons, obviously in a production environment you would want to set up a password user so that other people cannot access your database. And then one last thing you have to change in the config, or not in the config but in the framework, is you can close out of the app and go to bootstrap and start.php. In here you will find this piece of code, and this determines, well, it says what it does here, but we have to change this to enable the migrations. So I'm going to change this to development, and then inside this array I'm going to type localhost and then get host name. Now I'm going to be very honest. In previous versions, or at least in Laravel 4.0, which was what I used to use, this was not yet required. So I don't really know why this works, but it works. So we're going to use it. Now you can close out of that, and now you will have to open up another command window. I just get mine up from here. And using the artisan script that comes with Laravel, we are going to generate some migration files. So we have to create files for the users table, a forum groups, forum categories, forum threads, and forum comments. So for each of them, I'm going to do a PHP artisan migrate make, and then I'm going to give them a name. In this case, I'm going to create users table. Now, that's a common convention to name your migration files create and then the table name and then underscore table. So now I'm going to do that for the others as well, and I'm going to be back when that's done. Okay, so I did that. As you can see, I created the files forum groups table, create forum categories table, create forum threads table, and a create forum comments table. However, it doesn't matter at all what you call these files, it's just a common naming convention. And now I'm going to go back into my text editor, in my case Sublime, and I'm going to navigate to app database migrations, and let me just increase this. Here you will see these files you just created prefixed with a timestamp so that they're always unique. Now I'm going to show you these for the first. I'm going to record the creation of the first table and then show you the other tables because it's a kind of repetitive thing to do, creating these schemas as we call them. I'll get into that later. So yeah, let's get into the users one. Now, a Laravel migration contains a class which extends migration, and a class is basically a group of functions that connect to each other or have the same that serve the same purpose. No, that's not the correct way to say it, but they all have a usage that connects them. For example, this class is called create users tables, and both these functions have to do with the users table. Now, it has to extend migration, which means that it will inherit all the functions of a class called migration. Therefore, if the migration had a function called say hello, for example, you could use the create users table to say hello, even though it doesn't actually have that function in here. Now, as you can see, we are using a blueprint for our table. This is a Symfony class, I believe, and we are using the migration. So, how do we create these tables? Well, we are going to use the schema builder that comes with Laravel, and the way you use it, you type schema, and then there's a static method called create. Now, this method takes two parameters. The first one is a string with what's it called, the name of the table, and Laravel assumes that your tables are always plural forms, so I'm going to call mine users. And the second argument is a callback function, and a callback function is a function that it can store and then run when it completed a certain task. So in this case, the function will have one argument, namely the table variable, which will give us the opportunity to create that table, and I'm going to type hint it to, oh, that's not the correct thing to do, to blueprint. Now, this type hinting means that the only class or type of function or type of variable you can put here has to come from the blueprint class, which we're using up here. This is not required. However, I do suggest doing it so that you make less errors in your code. Now, what we want to do in this users table, we have to have an ID field. So I am going to reference this variable table, and then one of its methods called increments, which basically means I'm going to give it an integer value with primary key and auto increment. That means that it's going to be incremented every time you add something to the database automatically, so you don't have to do it yourself. and we are going to store a string of the username, of course, that's a useful thing to do, and we are going to store a string of the password. Now, of course, the password is going to be encrypted because, well, storing passwords in blank text is a very bad thing to do since it will make your site very vulnerable. However, encryption is something that is built into Laravel, so it will be very, very easy to use that. Then I'm going to add one more field, or two more fields actually, but one more field that actually matters, and that's going to be an enum. And an enum is a database or a type which can only have predefined values. For example, if you have a string, I can set a string to whatever I want. It doesn't really matter. However, an enum can only have the value that is already predefined by me. And this enum is going to be an isAdmin field with an array of its choices. Now I'm going to give it a choice 0 or 1 because I want to make sure if a user logs in, I want to check if it's an admin, and by default that will be 0, and that means that it's not an admin. However, the first user we create will have an isAdmin value of 1, which means it is an admin user. Now, to make the default work, I'm going to add a default of 0, so that by default a user will not be an admin. And then the last thing I want to add is a table timestamps, and this will add a created at and updated at field to the table, which is used by Eloquent, which we will get in later for our models, to track when the table was updated for the last time, and when it was created, of course, or when the entry was updated and the entry was created. Now, in the other function down here, we are going to have another schema method. On this one, it's going to be drop, and I apologize for the chirps outside. And dropping a table means deleting it in MySQL. So we are going to drop the users table in this case. Now, I'm just going to pause the video here and do this for all these other files, and then come back and walk you through them because it's very, very similar to this. You just have to change up these values here to match what you want to store in the database. So I will see you when I've done that. Okay, so I did all the other files and I'm going to now walk you through them. So first up is the forum groups. Now I'm creating a table called forum_groups, and for all our forum tables I'm going to prefix them with forum_, and then again with the callback function here. Now I'm giving this an ID, as you should do with nearly everything that you're storing in a MySQL database, because it makes recall or getting them from the database very easy, because you know that they'll always be unique. I'm going to store the title or the name of the group. I am going to store who created the group, so each admin can see what other admins created, and I'm going to add the timestamps. Now, in here, this is going to just always be the same, just changing the name to the table you used up here and dropping the table. Now, for the forum categories, I'm giving it an ID again, a title again. I'm going to store which group it belongs to, and I'm going to store who created it and adding the timestamps and dropping it down here as well. Now, for the threads table, this is going to be a little bit more interesting. But again, an ID, a title. I'm going to add a body with a type of text. Now, a text type can hold up to, I think it's about 65,000 characters, somewhere near that. And a string can only hold 255 or 225. I always mix them up, but a lot less and not enough to type out an entire story. So that's why we're using the text type over here. Now I'm going to store which group it belongs to, I'm going to store the category, and I'm going to store the author, and adding the timestamps, and down here dropping, oh dear, what did I do here? Now that's not correct. See, I messed up. Just delete that. Don't mind that. It's schema drop. Did I do that here too? No, okay. So this is just dropping that table again. And for the comments, I am going to again give it an ID. This time I'm going to skip the title because it's just like a comment to a thread, so you don't really need a title for it. I'm just going to store the body of it again in a text type, so you can type a more elaborate story, I guess. I'm going to store the group, the category, the thread it belongs to, and the author and when it was created. And down here I'm just dropping it again. So feel free to pause the video. I am going to try to remember to put a list of the fields with their respective types in the description, because as you can see, it's very easy to read this and just add it yourself. So I will just make a list with what fields you need and what type you will need for it. So basically just put the name inside the brackets in between quotes of the type I give you, if you think that's convenient. Yep. So now to check if this works, I'm going to open up my trusty command window again and just execute the following command: PHP artisan migrate, and enter, and that should create a migration table which stores your migration history, I guess. And here it says that it migrated all of the files successfully. So now let me open PHP admin, reload the page, and well, it did. It created tables including the migrations, but that's just the Laravel table we don't need. And in this users table, I'm going to check out the structure, and yep, it has an ID, a username, a password, and is admin field, a created ad, and updated ad, which is these two fields come from the timestamps method. So that's this method here. Yep. So that's it for today, I believe. Yeah. So I hope to see you next time when we are going to actually start doing some setting up of the pages, and that's going to be awesome. So see you then.